Discover how smarter project insights can lead to better project outcomes.
Hello, project people, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. As you probably noticed, no Val today. We don't have a Martin today either, but that's okay. We have an amazing guest in Mr. Adam Robinson. Adam, welcome to the pod. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me today.
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. It's Val and Martin's loss. So there we are. There we are. But look, a fantastic topic you've chosen, the Boston Barrier. Selfishly, I don't know too much about it, which means that's a world of exploration for me on this episode. But before we jump into that, we always love to start with a baseline because, you know, myself and Val and Martin are, you know, project controls is our sweet spot. So we're geeks. We like a baseline, right? A good old-fashioned baseline. Where did it all start out for you? How did you get into project management, mega projects, and the industry you're in?
Oh wow, that's okay. So baseline. How did I start off? So I guess my interest in engineering, civil engineering, came about from a young age. Holidays on a beach, watching running water run down a beach. My brother and I, my dad, we used to sit there and dam the water, pretty much, and we just used to make massive ponds on the beach, and then we used to knock them down and watch it all disappear at the end of the day. Kind of really got me interested in what you can do in the kind of the built environment and things like that. And then careers fairs, talking to architects and civil engineers, and the civil engineer that I spoke to at the time at sort of 15, 16 really kind of inspired me to making a difference into this world. It's like, if you can go and do anything, why not kind of work within the environment and be influential on that front. And then took the kind of really unconventional route and left school at 16 after GCSEs, but got onto an apprenticeship, so a civil engineering apprenticeship, sponsored by a company called John Molan Construction at the time. Obviously, big player back in the day, and was doing a part-time ONC in civil engineering and working on my first job was Jubilee Line Extension, Contract 111 at Canning Town.
Wow.
So that's where I was. I literally went through the station last week over to the Excel Centre, so having a few kind of memories from 20 odd years ago, and really escalated from there. So spent time on contracting, moved into consultancy, did another further apprenticeship in civil engineering, HNC. Spent 12 years, I think, in consultancy, so doing pretty much anything and everything across the country. So, and then the back end of that got into water, working for the Environment Agency, doing their flood alleviation schemes. That really kind of ticked my boat. And as we say, really from there, then sort of contractor consultancy, why not go and do the client role? Came into the Environment Agency as an operational field team leader, managing our field teams out in the field. Then did a bit of a stint over in our waterways team, setting up an asset performance team, looking after all our waterways assets. And then Boston Barrier kind of arrived after the 2013 floods. So I was kind of a flood incident duty officer on the night that the tidal surge came down on the 5th of December in 2013. And then, the role kind of snowballed from there, really. We got kind of guaranteed government funding, and then the role for continuity of senior leadership came up. So I applied and have been doing it ever since, really. So I think we're knocking on, 7.5, 8 years, I think now. So really from that point of inception through to kind of where we are now, where we've got a operational barrier in place, and we've got another probably 12 to 18 months worth of work left to finally finish off, really, and protect over sort of 14,000 homes. It's phenomenal. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's really where I've come from, and we'll see where we go, but who knows?
Wow, that is an amazing career so far, and that is a big nutshell. You've packed a lot into that nutshell, but yeah, wow, amazing. 7.5 to 8 years. Just for those, I guess, that aren't familiar with environmental agency, could just give us a little bit more about who they are, what they do, for those non-UK listeners?
Yeah, so non-UK, so the Environment Agency is part of the DEFRA group. So we really lead on all coastal and inland and coastal flood defence work. We also have other functions, so environment and business functions. So we look after waste management, water quality, but my side of the business is flood and coastal risk management. So that's where we go. We have kind of small minor works where we look after flood defences, so asset maintenance, but then we also go to asset development. So we get everything from small schemes, pumping stations, water transfer schemes, through to sort of major infrastructure projects like the Boston Barrier, where we're talking 100 million plus. So we have a real massive kind of vast scale of quantum of projects. We're currently in our current 6-year program of work. We had a £5.2 billion settlement.
Wow.
Sounds a reasonable chunk of money, but clearly flood defences don't come cheap, and we have to kind of deliver on government ambitions. So we're looking at 336,000 homes in the current 6-year program, I think, being better protected. So our last 6-year program, we did 300,000 homes. So Boston was a big proportion of that. We kind of delivered just shy of 5% of that national target within that 6-year program, which was a fantastic achievement.
No, that's amazing achievement. Just picking up before we jump in, you spoke about jumping from contractor to client, and I've done that as well. And it's interesting to see the different sides of the coin. But no, we won't share war stories on that just yet, because there's not enough time to get into it. I'm sure as we talk, we'll speak about, the effects of climate change as well on what you do, because that has to be taken into account. But the Boston Barrier, so again, for those non-UK or those in the US, it's not Boston in the US, right?
No, definitely not Boston in the US. Boston, east coast of Lincolnshire in the UK.
Okay, great, fantastic. And so you mentioned the 2013 floods. For those that don't know, what happened? What was the impact of the floods? And then how did the Boston Barrier sort of come into being?
Yeah, so 5th of December 2013, 9th, ingrained in the brain. So we had an East Coast tidal surge, so kind of the North Sea Armageddon scenario, but not quite to that extent. We have a storm surge come over the top of the UK, and it comes down, it funnels down through along the East Coast, down the Channel, and kind of as it kind of tightens up down towards London, you obviously get the surge predicament that we have, and that kind of escalated up to Haven, which is at Boston. We've got existing defences clearly in Boston at 6 metres AOD, but the tidal surge came in at 6.08 metres AOD, unfortunately. So we had a number of our defences were overtopped. We had a breach in one of our coastal defences just further down the river at a location called Slippery Gout through a tip. And then we had a couple of our flood walls, some undermining of the ground conditions, so some flooding. So through that, we had around about 800 properties and businesses were flooded in the town centre of Boston on that night. And I say 5th of December, so we're talking 20 days before Christmas. We've got a grade 1 listed building in Boston. And all the catacombs were flooded in there. And it was really kind of a real difficult position to be in.
Well, so Adam, I appreciate that. Probably, you'd want some charts and pictures to help describe what you just mentioned there, but I think you did a pretty good job for describing something that's quite visual verbally. So thank you for that. So right, Boston Barrier. What is it? It's a flood defense, right? For me, that's not educated in this area. Is it basically building a giant wall? Is that what it is?
Yes and no. And I suppose on a real basic level, just a giant wall stops the North Sea coming in and flooding an East Coast town. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So we kind of break it down into 4 main parts, I guess. So we've kind of got right bank works, which is a more conventional steel sheet pile flood wall with concrete capping next to a public footpath. We've then kind of got our primary barrier, so that's a 25 metre wide rising sector gate, comes out of the bed of the river. And that literally just closes off the haven. So that stops that propagation of water running up into the town centre. And then we run through a existing operational port estate on the left bank. So we've had to kind of work around the port operations. We've had to be mindful of how their business operates and how we don't impact on them on the long term. So there's load relief platforms, flood walls that are kind of set back and incorporating outer key works and lighting and things like that. And then we've got another set of vertical sector gates going in the wet dock entrance to bring us up to the correct level for the next 100 years. So I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but Boston Barrier is designed for the next 100 years, taking into account climate change. And then we have the joys of connecting kind of that horseshoe effect of work into a grade 2 listed structure on one of the other outfalls in Boston. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. I mean, the gate itself, 25 meters wide, 11.5 meters high, nice tidy 300-ton structure in itself. And then we fill it with 400 tons of ballast water.
Wow.
So yeah, so second biggest flood defence asset in the UK of that style. So obviously clearly bowing to the likes of the Thames Barrier. But yeah, second biggest at the moment, but we've got another bigger one kind of in the pipeline potentially in the near future. So
Wow, that I can't even comprehend that size and magnitude and weight. That is absolutely incredible. Okay, so just trying to get my head around the structure, right? And this project. Now, there's obviously techniques, but there's probably a lot of challenges and risks associated with building something in effectively, which is something that's quite wet, I'd imagine. Or is it dry? How do you do this? I mean, I'm coming here totally from a layman's perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We can pull it into a bit of, so we do a lot of STEM work with the local schools, so primary, secondary schools and universities. So we'll bring it down to kind of STEM level, if that's all right with you, Dale. So yeah, so clearly we've got kind of a crest level, we've got a 50-meter wide river, and that tapers into what was it, about 40 meters at the bottom. So our barrier is 25 meters wide. The whole structure that we built in within the cofferdam, so clearly cofferdam construction here, 35 meters by 35 meters, and we were running down to 18-meter depth easily by the time we've excavated out to put our foundations in to build back up. So quite simple really in the grand scheme of things. Nice simple 35 by 35 meter cofferdam, but don't forget we're in a navigational river as well. So we've got to maintain a 26-boat fishing fleet on a daily basis running past our works. So we have a 18-meter wide bypass channel that we installed or allow for continuous flows of two rivers. So upstream of where we are, we've got the Lower Witham, which discharges, so really east of England, for those that don't know Lincolnshire, flat as a pancake. And the Lower Witham discharge into the Haven takes in the cathedral cities of Lincoln and then runs all the way around to Grantham. So it's a huge, long, flat water body. But we have to maintain that continuous discharge, otherwise we end up with inland flooding if we clearly blocked off the river. And then we've got another system which is managed by ourselves and the internal drainage boards called the Black Sluice pumping station outfall in the South 40-foot. So it's a man-made drainage channel. Again, that kind of then discharges literally just above our barrier. So we've got these two reasonably large size water bodies coming at us. We've got 26 fishing vessels, we've got recreational riverboat users, and an operational port all on our doorstep that we have to contend with and operate with, and all the stakeholders that you can consider as well. So yeah, so the construction methodology, it's not necessarily massively unusual, but it did come with challenges clearly just because of the size of it, and then excavating down to the invert levels and then effectively just building back up standard reinforced concrete structure, off-site manufacture for the gate that was provided by our supplier over in Holland. So our Hollandia Infra delivered that for us. Then we get into the interesting stuff. So with the gate delivery, I mean that was brought over the North Sea on a barge on SPMT, so mobile transport units.
Wow. That must have been a sight.
Yeah, so if you check it, so we've got some really good social media frontage. So we've got a Twitter page, Facebook page, Instagram page, and we've got an Institution of Civil Engineers landing page as well. Now there's a time lapse somewhere around there. If you go looking for it, shows a 300-ton gate arriving in Boston on a high spring tide. So we needed the height. So we took down the downstream cofferdam. So we had like, because of the cofferdams, just kind of feed the beast when we're building, because we're on a really long linear site. There's not a lot of space. So for hook length, so the contractor with the so BAM Nuttall, Mott MacDonald, or BMM JV, really good idea. They came up with crane platforms upstream and downstream, so we could have 2 hooks in at all times. But we also use that as part of our landing ramp. So we have a barge come up, moors up next to the cofferdam. We bring down the downstream cofferdam wall. We then remote control our 300-ton gate.
Wow.
Off the barge after turning it through 90 degrees on the river. So bearing in mind, we're talking a couple of £1 million asset here. And I'm sat there on site watching a remote control car, bogies, turn this gate on a floating pontoon. And then we drive it off there into the downstream kind of crane platform onto a temporary bridge. And then we lower it into position onto our operational arms, radial arms. 56 bolts hold each side on. That's all it is.
Wow. And the precision of that, does it have to be like millimeter perfect?
Yeah. No, it was. We jokingly on the day, so we had to take down our one of our control buildings on the left on the central pier, so we could actually bring the gate in over it. So that's one of our hydraulic control rooms. So that was taken, both of those were taken away, so we could bring the gate in. And as we turned the gate, there was somebody stood there, and I joke not, 300 mil, I reckon, between turning the gate and not hitting the steel sheet pile wall on the left. And we jokingly sat there and said, well, we'll just stand here with a paintbrush just in case it catches, and we can just paint over the scratch as it goes past. It'll be fine. But yeah, one of those days where it's a long day, but yeah, definitely my better half and my kids were there, and they were watching it come in, all the media, and yeah, you just, you don't do that. I don't know, I can't imagine doing it again. Love to do it, but yeah, phenomenal stuff.
It's one of those things I'd imagine if you're part of it, you're holding your breath the whole time until they're all in place. Breathe out now.
Yeah, you're kind of first on site and last off site, and it's some really good photos. And one of the key things for me was, again, many moons ago, I saw a time lapse video of development, and it's one of those things that just, it's, for me, it's about sharing that knowledge about the things that we as an industry build. So it shouldn't just be the specialists that are interested in this. So this is where kind of I go into my STEM kind of role and sharing information. And if I can inspire, or the team that work for me can inspire just one engineer for the future, because they can sit there and go, actually, when I was 8, this crazy group of people came into my school and talked about this 300-ton gate, and we talked to them, and we're like, and you sit there and you talk to 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and 300 ton doesn't mean anything. So Boston Barrier is the equivalent of 93 average-sized elephants. There you go. There's your STEM. But straight away, you can they then sit there and go, oh my goodness, because every child can picture an elephant, can't they? And it just helps kind of tell that story. And I think for me, that's what it's all about. So with this time-lapse video, it was really key. So we've got a time-lapse from literally day dot. So you can sit there and you can watch the tide come in twice a day on this video. It snows, it rains, it's sunny, it's lovely. The gate comes in, and you just see us building this amazing structure over a kind of a 2-year period.
We'll definitely get the links from you and post them in the show notes, because yeah, that's something I'm sure the listeners want to go and have a look at. And thank you for, bringing it the different levels to this podcast, because we do have a variety of listeners as well. We do have some more technical that would love what you're talking about, and then we do have some new to the profession as well. So we'll go all over the show as we keep going. But okay, so we're kind of a bit halfway through. Let's get a little bit controversial now. So just thinking about it, right? We're building a man-made structure to stop Mother Nature, right?
Yep.
In a sense. What do you say to those that say, well, actually, we should let Mother Nature take its course, and there's rewilding, that's something that's been spoken about, and all that type of thing. What do you say to those that come and say, well, we should just let it be?
Wow, yeah. There is always that question: is at what point do you draw a line of not doing anything? I think the 14,200 properties that we're protecting through the investment in Boston, I think all of those people will be like, yeah, it's a really good project. Clearly, I think clearly as an organisation, we are heavily involved with flood defence assets and things like that, but we also look at where we should be looking at how we realign defences. So just because there's a defence there that's been there for however many years, for example, or an asset, doesn't mean it's the right asset for moving forward. So we do look at what is the best type of construction. So in our case, a barrier is the right construction for us. But further up on the East Coast, so we do sand recharge work on the East Coast projects, where we kind of pump sand onto the coast to provide that protection to the East Coast. But we've done projects where we've realigned the location of the East Coast, and we've regenerated sort of intertidal salt marshes and environmental habitats. So just because I'm here and I'm leading a major kind of grey infrastructure project doesn't mean that that's always going to be what we do as an organisation. There are lots of different projects and outcomes, and even when we do go down the line of major infrastructure investment or just normally infrastructure investment, we're always looking at offsetting that. So that's always key to the work that we do. So we're always looking at environmental mitigation, or we all are looking at the moment, carbon mitigation. So whether that's through embodied carbon or operational carbon, that's really at the forefront of what we do. And we're really leading the way for our kind of 2030 net zero promise that we've made to the industry.
That's fantastic. And I was going to ask you about carbon, because it's great that you brought that up as well, because just going back on 300 tons of gate, how much carbon goes into that. And what are some of the ways you do offset carbon? Because that's we all hear it. Oh, we're offsetting. How do we offset?
Yeah, so what we've done on the Boston barrier, so some of the key things. So we've used a low carbon concrete. So we've got high GGBS replacement concrete. So 70%, I think, is the number that we've got. So that's really allowed us to bring down the embodied carbon within our structure. But not only that, but the team have really worked hard on, because normally your low carbon concrete isn't necessarily for structural elements. We use it a lot more for kind of your paving and things like that. Whereas we've got a major infrastructure that's taken millions of newtons of direct loading into it off 2 hydraulic rams and the gate. So we've got a high strength structural low carbon concrete. And actually the work that we've done on Boston has kind of really paved the way corporately for us to look at how we can use low carbon structural concrete in much wider areas of the work that we do. But that's not to say what we've done is now cutting edge. This is a really fast moving pace. I mean, some of the conversation I'm having with supply chains on self-healing concrete, sort of biomimicry concrete, and how we can we're putting concrete in the ground, but actually if we can integrate biomimicry into the face of that structure, well, does that bring us environmental habitat creation without going away and doing something else? So can we create environmental habitat on the back of the structures that we're putting in place? Do you know what I mean? And kind of being more holistic on that front. And then you get down to the normal stuff where we've got a control building. So yeah, we've got our solar PV on the roof, we've got our air source heat pumps, LED lighting. And it's just really looking at the project as a whole. So one of the bigger areas that we save carbon. So our control building that I've just mentioned, originally when we started off, our control building, as you normally do, all your major assets are on the ground floor, hydraulic power units, control room, yada, yada, yada. But because we have to protect that control room from flooding, we then go, okay, so if our defense is over top, control room needs to be safe. So how do we do that? So we'll put it in a boat effectively. So reinforced concrete flood walls, submarine doors. You then generate a boat. So then you need to anchor the thing down. So then we've got 30 long 18-meter concrete piles anchoring the thing to the floor. We were sat in a design meeting. Couldn't tell you who it was, but because we really had an integrated team, project member sits there and just goes, why don't you just put everything upstairs? And literally, it's one of those moments where everyone kind of looks at each other and goes, okay, so yeah, why don't we just put everything upstairs? So we changed the structure from, do you know what I mean? You just go to a standard steel frame, raft or standard foundation. So straight away, there's £300,000 worth of saving in physical asset, the carbon content of that, program efficiency. And I think the thing is, we look at carbon reduction on some of the tangible stuff. But actually, when you're on site, if I can reduce the program, or we collectively can reduce a program of works down, even at just 1 week, the carbon of that 1 week of not being on site is still carbon saved through our delivery. Does that make sense? And I think sometimes we don't necessarily think about those kind of wider implications on, if we can streamline stuff, then we can save program time, then that has a carbon value associated with it. And I think it's just how we want to assess it. And I think we just have to be more mindful of what we are allocating carbon to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the fact that you've brought up that sort of that boardroom moment, that aha moment, because we don't often share those types of stories. And did you find there was any specific technique, whether it was the culture or the way you conducted meetings, that allowed people to just think differently, that diversity of thought element? Because often you have this blueprint or this plan, and this is what we're going to do, and everyone's so focused on getting it done, we don't leave enough space or time to think broadly of what opportunities are there to do things better, whether it's related to carbon or do things more environmentally friendly, or just impact less, and also around the whole well-being of people as well, because often on these big projects there's lots of pressure. Is there anything that, in your 7.5, 8 years, that you've said, well, actually, this has been really fantastic and this has really helped the way we think about delivering this project?
I think from the start, Dale, is what I've set out to do is we've got the Boston Barrier team. So we talk about the Boston Barrier team as a collective. And that's made up of staff from the Environment Agency, BAM Nuttall, Mott McDonald, Turner and Townsend, Jacobs, a whole raft of different organisations. But fundamentally, from my point of view, we are the Boston Barrier team. Doesn't matter where you get your paycheck from, we are collectively here to deliver this really good outcome for the community of Boston. So it doesn't matter where your ideas come from. And I think we talk a lot about safe environments and not feeling that if you can say something, you're not going to be criticised or ridiculed or anything else. And I start a lot of my, I'm the one that's going to likely ask the stupid question. So it's really putting people at ease. And I'm a bit of a nerd. I like innovation. I like new ways of working, technology, all that stuff. Kind of, you just sit there and you read it and it's, oh, that sounds good. So I talk to people a lot and go, just bring me your crazy. Doesn't matter how mad you think it is, because fundamentally, as a client, we clearly don't know everything. And our supply chain do a lot of innovation and leading edge stuff that people don't always look at. And I think it's generating that really good conversation on whether that be with the team that work on the project itself. So the design managers or construction managers, is just talk to me. If you've got a good idea, let's hear about it. Because actually, as a client, just within the environment, you see, if we aren't leading the way, and one of our senior directors that kind of recruited me into the role, his kind of starting was, Adam, if you don't deliver this innovation and kind of carbon reduction on Boston, nobody will. because you've got the budget, you've got this iconic project. If you can't deliver it, who is? And what we do, and that's part of my ethos throughout the delivery, is we've talked a lot about what we've delivered and we've shared it widely. So actually other projects, whether they're 100,000 projects, tens of millions or whatever number it is, they can go, oh, Boston Barrier did that. Why we could do that as well, because actually it's already been done. So you're not the first person to go away and do something that could be seen as innovative or a little bit different, because most people don't like to go first. And I think that's the thing. So we are quite happy to kind of push those boundaries quite rightly within sensible bounds. But that's where I've kind of hopefully led the project, and we've done a lot of those firsts and set the boundaries, and hopefully other people will follow.
No, I love that. I love that. I mean, you're in good company. You know, we love disruptors, as we like to call them. Some people say innovators. But disrupting the way we do things in the positive way, as you say, is always a good thing. And, you know, you're right. I think a lot of people are a bit afraid to put their head above the parapet and say, you know, how about this? This, you know, it's not conventional, but maybe this is different. And I guess, as you're saying, you know, being the leader that creates that atmosphere, that, you know, psychological safety, where it's okay to fail, because we're trying something different and better, right? And I still, you know, we talk about it so often. We've been doing this podcast for over 2 years, Adam, and we've been talking about leadership, culture, behavior. We've had, you know, dedicated episodes around, and yet I still go into certain project environments and I still find that it's sort of old. And I think on our last podcast, Michelle Banner had a great saying of it's, you know, male, pale and stale, or something like that. You know,
old male, pale and stale.
Yeah, something like that. And with that comes a certain distinct environment. And I'm glad to hear that, you know, big, massive, mega projects like yourself are actually embracing a new way of working. I want to ask as well around behaviors and culture and leadership. Is there also a different approach to the contractual setup, because you spoke about JVs and supply chains, etc., or was it sort of your more stock standard contractual setups? Because we spoke about it before as well, where the contract often drives behavior, and if companies are there to make profit, then they're going to drive the behaviors that make them the most profit. So I just want you smiling there. There's some anecdotes you can share.
Like you say, the contract is key, isn't it? Let's be honest. So Boston, so in the environment, we run a framework contract arrangement. So we tender out on a framework. So obviously, clearly, we've got a lot of money to spend, government money that needs to be applied correctly. So our supply chain tender for those, and they come on the current NGSA framework. Boston is the biggest legacy on the old water and environment management framework, so the WEMP framework. So we're running an EC3. But really within our framework, within our contract, we were really keen on pushing the carbon and things like that. So we've actually written into our contract. So we had a sequel award. We had an interim sequel award for the delivery of the project. So we wrote the need to complete the sequel award into the contract. It's as simple as that. It is not difficult. I want my supplier, in this case, BAM and Mott MacDonald, to deliver this outcome. So if I want you to do it, it's in your contract. It's as simple as that. You come and work for us. This is our outcome that we want. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to put those things into the contract. And then we also then have efficiency targets and things like that, and carbon reduction targets. So that's all written into there. So the supply chain is incentivized to do it. We have a pain gain share within the contract as well at the end of the day. If we all work really well together, then when we bring it under target cost, then both parties benefit from it. And conversely, if we go over budget, then both parties suffer some pain in it. And it's it works. I mean, contracts are never nice. They always can. They're always good until they go bad. Let's be honest. But yeah, no, I mean that's how we operate. So we like to generate those working relationships with our supply chain in the Environment Agency, and we do kind of nurture them, so to speak. We want to work. We do under the new framework. We've got key suppliers, and we put all the work out to them, and we develop that working relationship. So you're in it for the long game, really, when you're with us. I mean, current contract, we kind of, I'm 8 years in, we've got the same designer, different supplier, but then we bring in that early contract involvement, so the ECI work as well. For me, again, I can see the benefit of having those early engagements. Sometimes I think well, not just organisationally, but across the industry, we don't necessarily talk to people enough early on, because as I said, as a client, we clearly don't know everything or anything really sometimes. And that's where the specializations from the civil engineers and the contractors, they know how they're going to build something 9 times out of 10 when you just talk about it. So yeah, it's getting that conversation going early for me, and it's one of those kind of early lessons learned on. You can never spend enough money on survey, ground engineering, ground investigation, sorry, and early conversations. You just can't.
Yeah, no, amazing, because we've spoken before about, instead of writing contracts to deliver things, deliverables, if that, and you mentioned it there, it was outcome based. And for most clients, it's about outcome, right? About benefits. And not often are the benefits written into the contracts for the contractors and subcontractors. They're written to deliver things, and the client then tries to manage that to go, how do these things that they're delivering deliver the benefits that we want? But you're going, actually, no, we actually took some of the benefits we wanted and wrote that into the contracts, which is amazing. Was that difficult for them to agree to, or was it quite a straightforward thing to go, actually, no, we can do this?
I think, again, suppliers are really good. So clearly, nobody really agrees to everything all the time, do they? So
sure.
Don't get me wrong, in the detailed conversation, there were some things there. Lawyers get involved, don't they? And we don't agree to that, and we don't agree, which is fine. Things get amended, but fundamentally, the guts of it is still there, and both parties are happy. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing fundamentally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wonder how difficult it was, because I could see the argument that, well, we're not in control of delivering those benefits. We can deliver this thing that you want, but it's only a part of that, and so the whole control argument comes into it. But I mean, feel free to comment on that if you want.
Yeah, I think there's a shared element, isn't there? I mean, we as a client own some of the deliverables, clearly. There's some things that the contractor can't do, but then there's other things that the contractor can do. So there is a shared kind of arrangement that we're not just palming everything off onto the supply chain by any stretch of the imagination. And that comes with its challenges. So that's where you end up, isn't it? And that's where you need the really good teams with the experience around you. And that experience pays dividends. But for me, it's really about bringing on the new engineers and the new specialists as well. So COVID, well,
wow,
that's a whole nother story, isn't it? But our contractor, the project manager there, who bizarrely was also the agent on my first ever job, just after I left, he'd been through SARS in the Middle East before. So he was telling us, he's like, this is potentially going to go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So we'd already started implementing like site working bubbles and things like that, probably 4 weeks before the government mandate had come in. So we were really ahead of the curve. So we didn't have any downtime on the project at all. And we've really kept kind of COVID cases to a minimum.
Wow. I actually said the same thing to my wife when the news first broke. I was like, this is going to be big. And she's like, nah, it's going to be, just another little flu type thing. I was like, no, this is going to be big. And then we went into lockdown. And I said, I told you so. Anyway, that's between me and my wife.
Brave man.
A brave man indeed. Maybe it was one too many whiskeys. Who knows? Look, I want to switch gears slightly around people, because this is a long project, right? Lots of, as we're saying, pressurized situations, people looking to, I guess, be part of something amazing, truly amazing, which it sounds like it is And I don't think you're quite finished yet, right? With the Boston Barrier?
No. We've got,
Yeah.
we've still got another 30, 40 million pounds worth of work to deliver.
Yeah, just a little bit left.
Just a little bit at the end.
But yeah, I did do a little bit of research, Adam. I don't usually do research, but yeah, so you still got a little bit to do. You know, keeping I guess the nucleus of the skill set around long enough from cradle to grave, keeping motivation levels up, allowing people progression, because 7.5, 8 years is a long time, and people want to progress over that time. As a leader, then, what different techniques, tactics did you use specifically on the Boston Barrier to keep that going, or were your attrition rates, at the levels you'd expect?
So from our side of the business, so from client side of the business, we have a really low attrition rate on staff members anyway. So our staff turnover is quite low. But in regard to our side, we had project managers that did the preemptive work, so all the legal work and getting us into kind of tender stage and contract delivery, and then we changed PMs to a delivery PM.
Right.
So we did have that. My project executive, he has been on the project and the inception of Boston since it was kind of talked about in the 90s, I think he said.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so he knows everything about everything. I think I've worked on it a long time, but it's like there's a whole different ball game. But yeah, I think you get that motivation through delivering something so fantastic, really. And I think because we've got the key stages, so we had kind of the upfront legal work. So we've got a Transport Works Act order, so that's signed by the Secretary of State. So it's a public order to allow us to own, operate, and manage it. So the legal vessel to allow us to construct it. So that in itself is a whole project, resulting in a public inquiry that we did in Easter 2017. So we kind of have our team set up around that. So we have a number of specialists and pre-work that goes into there to deliver. And they then, some of them stayed on to the project, some of them moved on to pastures new, and then we brought in the next team, which is then looking at kind of the delivery phase, so the specialists around the tender appraisal work and things like that. So we did have an ebb and flow of staff members, but really one of the things that came about around my job was an audit around continuity of senior leadership. So that's where kind of my role kind of blossomed from, I guess, sort of 7, 8 years ago. And I like seeing stuff built fundamentally. So did all the legal work up front. Why wouldn't you kind of stay around to see this kind of baby that you kind of generated over a fast number of years? And I think within the team, they're all really bought into it. We've got design team. I think Charlie's been on the project now for 4, getting on 5 years. But because we've got such a kind of, do I say it, family environment? I don't know. Everybody knows each other, and everyone's kind of pulling in the same direction. We can all see that really good thing at the end of the tunnel on protect 14,200 properties. I mean, how many jobs do you go into knowing that at the end of the day, you're going to better protect 14,200 homes from flooding, not just for the next 5, 10 years, 100 years. 100 years. This isn't just me. This is like my kids' life and probably their grandkids' kind of legacy stuff. It's like, and engineers are the same. I'm sure you're the same. You go around, you drive around the UK, and you can bore whoever's in the car to tears. I built that. Do you know? And it could be the most nerdy thing. There's a badger crossing on the A1. Do you know what I mean? Every time I'm driving, there's a badger crossing. Yeah, we know. You've told us about 1 million times. Do you know what I mean? But it's that kind of investment in it, and you're giving something back, and it's I don't know how else to describe it. And I think that kind of passion within the team is really evident within the whole delivery team. So I say the team Boston Barrier is there to deliver this outcome from that team.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's infectious. I mean, even when you're talking there, I'm getting excited, so it's definitely got something to do with you as well, I'm sure, Adam. It's one of the, you're right though, because, I mentioned I also spent, a few years at TfL, and, I still use the underground and go around and go, I was part of that program, and I was upgrading this. And, when you're on one of the carriages. You go, oh, I was part of, you know, designing that cover, whatever the case may be. So there is a bit of pride element in that as well. And, you know, that pride and passion is something that we need to harness when we deliver projects, because as soon as it becomes a drag, I think you lose a bit. And I think it's becoming easier now that we're slowly opening up again. But I think, especially during the pandemic when everyone was at home, it was particularly difficult, I think, for a lot of projects to get that, you know, those excitement levels up and that passion, especially when everyone was so isolated. Was there anything that you wanted to share throughout that period, the lockdown periods, that you did particularly well? Or do you think you just tried your best just to get on with it?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one. I think COVID is individually, there's not just a project. Everyone had their individual challenges at home and with their family and everything else. So I think from our project point of view, we locked down really early, like I said earlier. So we really had our construction bubble. They were operating, they were in their own homes, and they were literally to site, back to their digs, back to site. We were really keen to make sure that we weren't putting anybody at risk. So obviously, clearly, lateral flow testing, etc., etc. But from the design side of the thing, so McDonald went literally pretty much overnight to remote working from a design point of view, and again from a client point of view, we're already kind of pretty much set up. I think the thing for me was making sure you continuously kind of spoke to the teams, and I think that was the key thing. So straight away we're going into, whilst you'd see somebody around having a cup of coffee or whatever it might be on site, straight away we're going into kind of coffee. I have bi-weekly coffee and catch-up meetings now with the team, and that could be everything from the dog at the weekend has done this through to this is the problem we've got on the project. So these are the things that we're going on comms and engagement, or these are the sticky points on around the contract or the delivery outcomes. And it wasn't structured. And I think that was the main thing. Half an hour, 45 minutes twice a week. I say sometimes it can go on for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, or you just have a conversation with somebody outside of that. And I think it was just being aware of how people were dealing with it. And as said, it's okay not to be okay. I think that was a key thing as well. But just talk to us, because we're all going through this. And I think if you don't articulate how you're feeling, the team itself can suddenly not disintegrate, but you get those tensions, and somebody could just be having a bad day, or something could happen that you'd normally pick up on, or you might talk to them about it quietly around an office somewhere. But being stuck in a remote location in your own home, and we had members of the team that won a third floor flat in London, and the only people they got to talk to was the lady at the corner shop when they went and got their bread and milk. And you just like, right, okay, so let's bring them in. Let's make sure that we're engaging with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'd imagine, you know, those 14,200 homes give you free coffee and donuts if you walk around as well. To say thank you. But no, you're right. It's that human interaction, and, you know, just that time spent. And if you're ever down in London, I'll grab a coffee with you as well. It'd be great to, you know, meet face to face. But you know, I guess just bring it back to what John O'Norman has said before to us as well. I think he said it on the podcast we had with him, is that we've learned a lot of lessons during COVID about looking after each other remotely. And the hope is that we take that back into the physical world when we meet up again. And I think there is probably a risk that we forget that, oh, okay, now we're in the office, we kind of, you know, you're not in that virtual realm. You don't have to go, oh, yeah, it's okay to be okay, blah, blah, blah. We can actually do that face to face, folks. You can actually see each other eye to eye and go, are you okay? You know, it's not difficult. It might be a bit daunting to see someone for the first time, especially if you've only met them virtually. I've done that, and it is like kind of, oh, I thought you're a bit taller, I thought you're a bit shorter, you know, because video has a different aspect. But I think have fun when you meet people face to face as well is the important thing, I would say. But yeah, geez, look, I want to make a little bit of time, Adam, for a bit of a feature that we have. And usually Machine Gun Martin is around to do this, but he's not. So I'll take some inspiration from him and see. So Machine Gun Martin, he's got a bit of a license to ask really awkward questions.
Oof.
I know. One of his awkward features is called defend the indefensible. And so during the chat, he's in the background thinking of something, really difficult to defend based on the conversation we've had. Obviously, I haven't had that much of a luxury to think about something difficult, but I'll give it my best shot. So you'll have 30 seconds to defend a statement that I'll make up in a second. And it's just a bit of fun. So here we go. Are you ready?
Go on then.
Let's go with climate change is not real. We shouldn't worry about carbon.
Oh, blimey. Okay. Right. So we should worry about carbon. I think it's clearly the evidence is there around the impacts of carbon on the environment. You've only got to start looking at kind of climate change around the poles de-icing. I mean, North Pole. I mean, we can sail a ship through it. Do you know what I mean? In the summer now, that just wasn't happening 30 years ago. Do you know what I mean? When we've got those kind of that evidence-based satellite stuff. And why wouldn't we do it? Let's be honest. Why would we not look at reducing our carbon? Because actually, it's the right thing to do. So if we can reduce that and reduce the impact on our wider environment, we don't have a plan B planet. We're stuck with what we've got. We've got to look after it. Resources are finite. They don't continually replenish. Well, they do, but over a long period of time, not within our lifestyles. And why wouldn't we use our assets efficiently? We use everything else efficiently. So why not our built environment and the places that we live? So whether that's building, renovations, and just understanding and being more holistic around what we do. So let's work with the environment rather than pushing against it all the time, but then protect what we've got as well. So 5%. So we can't back in time by offset and mitigation.
Well done. Fantastic. You are such a great sport. And folks, just by the way, I don't think it's fake news. That was just defended indefensible. Look, we do have one more feature, but before we get into it, Adam, where to next? I mean, you say you got this little slice of 30, 40 million to deliver. How long's left on the program? Current forecast?
Current forecast, end of financial year 23-24, let's say, worst case, hopefully.
There we go. So beyond that, what's next for Mr. Adam Robinson?
Oof, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Who knows? We've got other big projects on the right. We've got another barrier coming online at Bridgewater on the west coast. We've got another one. Lowestoft is always good fun. That's a 40-meter barrier, so that would kind of knock me off my second place pinnacle. So that's quite a nice place to go.
Wow.
Then we've got work in London, River Thames scheme, for example, things like that. Thames Barrier 2, who knows?
Who knows? Watch this space. Well, look, we'd love to have you back, just to kick the tires on any other project. Or perhaps when you're delivering in 2020. No, we won't wait that long. But we'd love to have you back on any topic, Adam. You've been fantastic. So as I said, I did promise you one more feature, and this one is called Fiverr. It's just 5 quick fire questions all about yourself. So if you're ready and willing to give it a go, we'll go for it.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, question 1. Steak, seafood, or salad?
Steak.
Nice. 2, what are the 3 must-have behaviors you look for in successful project teams?
Oof, that's a good one. Collaboration. Honesty, I think is key. And talkability. So just talk, because actually it's not the wrong thing to say anything.
Yeah, I love those 3. Question 3, what is one piece of advice for people new to the project profession?
It's questions. Because actually we're all happy to talk about what we do and share those lessons. If you don't know, just ask, because actually we've probably been there before and thought the same thing.
I'd agree with that. if you don't ask, you won't get anything. And if you do ask, and maybe it's not the answer you want to get, or maybe you don't get an answer, but you're not worse off. So
what's the worst can happen? They can say, no, I don't know the answer, but actually you need to go and talk to Dale over there.
yeah, and Dale won't have the answer, so go talk to Adam. Right, moving on. Question 4. If you could go back to one moment in your life, what would it be and why?
One moment in my life. Well, that's a really hard one. I think so. My granddad passed away last year, and he was actually integral to my first interview to get my apprenticeship when I was 16. And yeah, I'd like to go back to explain to him at that point what he's helped achieve.
Wow. Wow. That's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that as well. Very, very personal. Question 5. This is a bit of fun. Which superpower would you choose to have for a day and why?
Superpower for the day. Oh, we have this conversation all the time in this household.
Oh, lovely.
It changes all the time. Superpower for the day. It's got to be flying. And I would look to fly around the world and see all the amazing things that I've not got to see yet.
Wow. Anywhere you'd start? What's on the list?
Everything. I'd love to go over to the likes of Vegas and places like that. I haven't done that far over in America. So see all the kind of the lights, shall we say, and the kind of the noise and just the hustle and bustle. So yeah, things like that.
Yeah, I must say Vegas has got to be done. You know, catch a limo or whatever you got to do out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Look, Adam, it's been fantastic to have you on the podcast. Like I say, an hour is not enough to cover every single thing, but thank you so much for sharing everything you have. We've gone all over the show, which is standard for the Project Chatter podcast. There's probably things we missed out. There's probably things you thought we wouldn't cover, which is fantastic as well. But before we do let you go, Adam, is there any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Final thoughts, I think, is yeah, just whatever you're doing, just talk to people, challenge. And I think people that are leading projects or even just your line managers, they're not going to bite your head off for being positive and just having a conversation about it. And we're all in this at the end of the day. Carbon reduction, and I'll end on carbon, is if we aren't going to do it, who the heck is? And I think it doesn't matter whether it's the smallest bit of carbon that you can reduce through your house or your project or big chunks of carbon, it all adds up. And if you do a little bit now, when you compound that over 8 years or 50 years, it's a big chunk. So just do it. What have you got to lose?
Just do it, folks. Just do it because, yeah, as you say, no one else is going to. But Adam, thank you so much. It's been amazing, like I say, to have you. We'll have you back. We'll hopefully meet up in London if you're down here or if I'm up your way. But no, it's been fantastic. And thank you so much for your time.
Welcome. Nice to talk to you, Dale. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Also, shout out to Jonathan Norman for putting you in touch with us. Thanks, Jono. Once again, he's been absolutely amazing to the Project Chatter. So, folks, you've heard it. That's all we have time for on this episode. But remember, if you like what you've heard, please do help us pay it forward by sharing a link to this episode on your favorite social media platform. Once again, a massive thank you to our guest, Adam Robinson, and thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me, because there's no Martin and Val this time, it's bye for now.